though we don't really have a system for authentication, we're going to try to get that whole authentication workflow working anyway. So that's what we're trying to do here. When state.user is not set, show the sign-in component. When it is, show the main component. So I even think that's a tad imperative. When I'm signed in, show the main component, not when this.state.user is set. I mean, that may be how we know that, but I think I need a method on app called signed in. And exactly how that's implemented, who cares? I mean, we care because we have to write it. But once we've written it, the point is what we'll check, the condition we'll check, is whether we're signed in, not whether some particular piece of state is set. So I think this is a good method to have here. But I think all it's actually going to do is let's just return this.state.user.uid. If there's a UID on that object, then we're signed in. If there's not, then we'll get back undefined, and that'll be falsy. See what I'm saying? So I have app selected here as $R. Come on, switch. Why are you being a jerk? $R dot signed in. Undefined. That's falsy. Sign in as James at allthekims.org. R.signed in. Return something. So it's truthy. Cool. So now we need to decide which of these things to render at any given time using conditional rendering. So, Troy, how'd you do it?
I made an if statement, and I also made a true value when I did the sign in function.
Okay.
This dot signed in. So then if it was true, it would render the main. If I wasn't signed in, it would render.
So an if statement.
Yeah, if statement, yeah.
So sounds like something that belongs in curly braces. It's JavaScript. So if this dot signed in main else sign in that explodes because if statements are not expressions. So how did you get around that?
I returned. So I did the if statement in
So not inside the return block.
Yeah, just inside.
You just actually had a return up there. Yeah. So if one thing, you return one thing. If other, you return something else. Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's one way we can do it. What'd you do, Yamini?
Well, I used a variable, and then I used the eternity operator, and then set the variable to
Okay. Yeah, whether we have a Boolean variable or we have a method doesn't really matter, right? So you used a ternary instead of an if. So ternaries are expressions. So we could do that right in place here. You know what ternaries are? So it's a kind of an inline way of doing an if-else. But the cool thing is they return something. So, for example, 3 is less than 5. This is apparently the example I always use. That's the syntax. You have your condition, question mark, thing to return if it's true, colon, thing to return if it's false. This is present in a whole lot of languages. All the C-like languages and the ones like JavaScript that are not really C-like but use a lot of C's syntax, as well as in totally different languages like even Ruby has ternaries. Ternaries are very common, and they pretty much use the same syntax everywhere. Condition, question mark, what to return if it's true, colon, what to return if it's false. Yay. 3 greater than 5. Ah, cuss. You dig? So we could use this here. So our condition is this dot signed in. Question mark. Thing to return if it's true. Colon. Thing to return if it's false. So if you're not familiar with ternaries, this is super weird, but this is a really succinct and pretty readable way to do this sort of thing, to do conditional rendering in React. It's the way I prefer to do it when it's a case like this. Other times you might want to do another thing. Something else we could do is we could actually have separate functions that return each of those pieces of JSX and call those functions based on which condition is true. But once you get used to this syntax, then you can read that very quickly. Okay, question mark, that's the thing that happens if it's true. Colon, that's the thing that happens if it's false. So if we are signed in, we want main. If we're not signed in, we want sign in. Kind of get it? It's ternary, spelled like that. Ternary. Some people say terniary. There is no I there. It is not terniary, it is ternary. Which, if you're trying to Google it, helps to know. Ternary. Let's see if it works. We're not signed in, so I'm seeing the sign-in page. Let's sign in as Graham at, what do you do for fun, Graham? Oh, God. Gov. I don't know. Hey, there we are. Now if we add new chat messages, you have a job?
Yeah, I'm a sports park supervisor.
Ah. I work for Ron Swanson. I assume. That sounds like his department. All right, cool. Totally works. That's a pretty sweet avatar, I have to say, too. Well chosen. So how about signing out? We could do that, because all we have to do to sign out, what do we have to do to sign out? Someone who didn't actually do it. How would we sign out now? Come on, you can do it. How do we sign in? We set this.state.user, right? How do we sign out? Clear it, right? Set it back to an empty object. No big deal. So in app.js, let's add another method. I'll call it signout. This.setState. We'll set user back to an empty object. Seems reasonable. Let's try signing in. As that was you, Joe at look at his big brain .edu. Signed in. React. There's app. So $R dot sign out. Cuss, yeah, Uncle Cussa. Totally works. We have a nice sign out button, don't we? So what if we made that work? That's in the sidebar, right? How do we get it there? I want to call sign out from way down there. How do I do it? You all know how to do it. Someone, fine. Okay. That is what we want to do, though, right? Pass as a prop. So main gets the user. And we'll get sign out. And that is this dot sign out, right? That's right. So in main, that needs to go down to the sidebar. So sign out equals this dot props dot sign out. In the sidebar, we get our props up here, right? Here's props.user. We could go ahead and break those out with destructuring. There's user. Instead of props.user, just say user. And now we're going to get sign out too. And that needs to pass it to user info, I think. Isn't that where the sign out button is? Yeah. So user info gets the user and sign out. What am I doing? Sign out equals sign out. Inside user info, we get user. We also get sign out. Here's the sign out button where it actually happens. Oops. So we'll throw sign out equals sign out one last time. So inside sign out button, we get a prop called sign out. Here's our button. Let's give this button a non-click of sign out. That is a lot of passing props through components that aren't even using those props. There's got to be a better way. Yes, there is, but that is information you don't want to process right now. Let's sign in. Here we go. Ready? Oh, yeah. Sign out. Totally works. So I just passed that through a whole bunch of components until I got to the sign out button where I finally assign it to a non-click. So I'm not going to paste all of those right now, but here's my app. That's where most of this work was. Here's my app component. Here's my signing component. So the magic is I can now sign in and sign out. So implement authentication workflow. It's all fake. It doesn't check any passwords, right? But still. The whole idea of storing the currently logged in user, signing him back out, that part's done. We can figure out the rest.